You ever meet someone who just sweeps you off your feet right out the gate? I mean, they come in like a fairy tale. They say all the right things, do all the right things, make you feel like you're the only person on earth who's ever mattered to them. It's intense, it's romantic, it's exciting, but it's also dangerous. That's the first sign you're dealing with a narcissist, and it's called love bombing. See, a narcissist doesn't fall in love with you. They fall in love with what you can give them. Your energy, your admiration, your attention, your devotion. They're addicted to the chase, to the drama, to the illusion of power. So in the beginning, they'll pour it on thick. Compliments like honey, constant texts, grand gestures, big promises. You're the one I've been waiting for. I've never felt like this before. I can see a future with you. And in that moment, it feels real. It feels amazing. But it's not love. It's manipulation disguised as affection. Here's what's really going on. They're building a pedestal just so they can kick it out from under you later. They're crafting the perfect fantasy because that's what pulls you in deep. And once you're in deep, once you've emotionally invested, once you've started to believe in this once in a lifetime connection, they shift. The energy changes. They start to pull back. They criticize more. They go from texting you all day to get to you one-word replies. And you're sitting there wondering, what did I do wrong? But the truth is, you didn't do anything. The mask is just slipping. A narcissist can't maintain the fantasy forever. That over-the-top love in the beginning, that wasn't real. That was bait. That was control. They want you hooked before they start showing you who they really are. And that's the terrifying part, because by the time you realize something's off, you're already in it. You're already invested in this idea of who they pretended to be. You're chasing the version of them they used to trap you, not realizing that version was never real. I break this down even further. Real love is built slowly. It's earned. It's grounded in consistency, communication, and mutual respect. But when someone floods you with affection too fast, too soon, and it feels like a high, that's not love. That's a setup. And you've got to watch for it. Because here's what happens when you don't apple, when you buy into that fantasy and ignore the red flags. You start to abandon your intuition. You start to override your own boundaries. You excuse things you shouldn't. You explain away behavior that makes you uncomfortable. Why? Because you're trying to get back to that initial high, that rush, that feeling of being adored, wanted, needed. But that feeling, it's an illusion. It's a manipulation tactic. Narcissists are masters at it. They mirror you. They study you. They become whatever they think you want. And when they've got you, when you start to relax and trust them, that's when the control begins. You start questioning yourself. You start bending over backward to get back to how it used to be. You blame yourself when things go wrong. You think, if I just do this differently, maybe he'll go back to being the sweet guy I first met. But that sweet guy was a ghost, a character, a trick. Let me tell you something. Love isn't supposed to confuse you. It isn't supposed to make you feel like you're constantly doing emotional gymnastics. If someone is pouring on affection one day and cold the next, that's not passion. That's a cycle of manipulation. And love bombing is the first play in the narcissist's handbook. It's how they get in. It's how they win your trust. It's how they get access to your heart, your mind, your world, so they can start taking pieces of it without you even realizing it. And I know it's easy to romanticize the beginning, to hold on to those memories, to convince yourself that that was the real version of them. But here's the truth. Who someone is consistently over time, that's who they really are. And if you're seeing constant shifts in behavior, if your intuition is whispering that something feels off, don't ignore it. And don't let the memory of how they used to treat you blind you to how they're treating you now. The love bombing phase is addictive because it feels like magic. But real love, the real love is stable. Real love doesn't come with confusion and chaos. And the moment someone starts making you feel like you're walking on eggshells just to keep the peace run, I don't sit there thinking you can fix them. Don't make excuses like maybe he's just going through something. No. He knew exactly what he was doing when he put on that act. He knew how to play the part to get what he wanted. And now he's showing you who he is. Believe him. The longer you stay hoping that fake version of him will come back, the deeper the damage becomes. You start to lose yourself. You start to forget who you were before they came in with all their fireworks and fairy dust. And that's the goal, to break you down so they can control you. That's the real face behind the love bombing. It's not love. It's power. It's possession. It's ego. So if you're in something right now that started off too good to be true, pay attention. If the affection faded and now you're left confused and desperate for scraps, that's not love. That's a trap. And the only way to win this game is to step out of it completely. I don't wait for them to change. Don't wait for another apology. Don't wait for them to become who they pretended to be. That version doesn't exist. Just remember this: what starts fast burns out faster. Real love won't rush you. Real love won't manipulate you. Real love won't feel like a war zone. So trust your gut, see the pattern, and never let someone confuse emotional intensity with genuine intimacy. Because that's how they get you. You know it's wild. How someone can sit across from you, watch the pain on your face, your tears, your tart, your confusion, and feel absolutely nothing. Nothing but maybe a flicker of irritation because you're disrupting their comfort. So that's what it's like dealing with a narcissist. You're in a storm, they're the reason for it, and they're looking at you like you're the problem. That's when you know this person doesn't have empathy. I'm not talking about someone who's just emotionally unaware or bad at communication. I'm talking about someone who looks at your pain and sees a nuisance, someone who hurts you and gets annoyed when you react, someone who can completely dismiss your emotions because they never planned on caring about them in the first place. A narcissist doesn't have the emotional capacity or the desire to connect with your feelings. They're not interested in how you feel unless it affects them. This is what happens. You bring up something that hurts you. Maybe they said something disrespectful. Maybe they ignored you when you needed support. Maybe they did something shady and you try to express it not with drama, but with vulnerability. And they hit you with the cold wall. They sigh, they roll their eyes, or worse, they flip it. Why are you always so sensitive? You're making a big deal out of nothing. Here we go again. That right there, that's not a conversation. That's emotional dismissal. It's psychological warfare disguised as indifference. Because you're not even being heard. You're not being seen. Your feelings are being tossed aside like trash. That's what it feels like. You start questioning yourself, right? You wonder if maybe you really are too sensitive. Maybe you are the one overreacting, but no, you're not. You're reacting like any emotionally healthy person would when they've been hurt. The problem isn't your feelings. The problem is that you're dealing with someone who has no intention of valuing them. Let me make this clear. Empathy isn't optional in a relationship. It's foundational. You can't build something real with someone who can't feel for you, with you, or even beside you. And a narcissist, they'll watch you fall apart and feel nothing but annoyance that you're disrupting their vibe. You ever cry in front of someone and they look bored? You ever try to open up and be met with silence or worse, contempt? That's what it's like to deal with a narcissist. They don't connect with pain unless it's their own. And even then, it's about getting attention, not healing. Now, here's where it gets even more dangerous when you're in this dynamic long enough. You start suppressing your own emotions. You learn not to cry, not to speak up, not to make things worse. You're conditioned to silence your needs just to keep the peace. That's how they train you, whether they're aware of it or not. You become smaller, quieter. You internalize everything. And before long, you're a shadow of who you used to be. You used to be expressive, loving, passionate, but now you're numb because it's the only way you know how to survive in that emotional dead zone. And what's wild is that sometimes they'll accuse you of not being understanding, not being patient. Like, imagine that the person who can't give you a single drop of empathy accusing you of not doing enough. That's the trap. That's the twisted world you get pulled into. And it messes with your mind. You start feeling guilty for being human. You start thinking maybe if you just explain it better, they'll get it. Maybe if you just show them your pain more clearly, they'll care, but they won't. Because empathy isn't something you can force into someone. It's not a feature you can install. If they don't have it, they don't have it. And a narcissist, they'll mimic it when it benefits them, but it's not real. They'll pretend to care long enough to get you back in line. They'll offer a fake apology, maybe even a few tears, but it's a performance. Watch what they do after. Watch how quickly that remorse disappears when the spotlight's off. You can't build a healthy connection with someone who only acknowledges your emotions when it serves their agenda. You can't keep bleeding emotionally for someone who never even brings a bandage. That's what it feels like, emotional abandonment. And let me tell you, that's worse than being alone. Being with someone who makes you feel invisible is lonelier than being by yourself. And yet we stay, we hope, we rationalize because they weren't always this cold, right? In the beginning, they seemed sweet, attentive, kind, but that was just the mask. And when the mask slips, the truth is revealed. And the truth is you're dealing with someone who sees you as a tool, not a teammate. Someone who uses your emotions as weapons, not as bridges. Someone who doesn't see your vulnerability as sacred, but as leverage. You want to know how to spot a narcissist? Watch how they react when you're hurting. Watch how they respond when you're not at your best. Anyone can love you when you're smiling. Anyone can play nice when things are easy. But when the storm hits, when you're raw, emotional, and in need of support, that's when their true nature shows. And if all you get is indifference, if all you get is mockery, silence, or rage, that's not love. That's cruelty wrapped in charm. Stop making excuses for people who refuse to meet you in your emotional world. Stop shrinking just to avoid being accused of being too much. You're not too much. You're just too real for someone who's too shallow. And I know it's hard to walk away. I know you keep hoping they'll change, that maybe this time they'll finally get it. But every time you hand them your heart, they drop it. Every time you trust them with your feelings, they betray that trust. And how many more times are you going to let them teach you the same lesson? You deserve someone who leans in when you cry, not pulls away. Someone who hears your pain and says, I'm here, not you're being dramatic. You deserve empathy. You deserve to be seen, heard, and felt. And if they can't give that to you, no matter how charming they are, no matter how good they look on paper, no matter how much history you've got, they are not for you. That coldness you feel, that's not your imagination. That's not just a bad day. That's the reality of dealing with someone who lacks empathy. And once you see it, once you feel it deeply enough, it becomes impossible to unsee. You ever try to explain something that hurts you, and somehow, by the end of the conversation, you're the one apologizing. You walk in with facts, with clarity, with every reason to speak up, and you walk out confused, second-guessing everything you just said. That's not just miscommunication, that's gaslighting. And when you're dealing with a narcissist, it's one of their most powerful weapons. Gaslighting is psychological warfare. It's subtle, it's strategic, and it's designed to make you question your reality. And it starts small, real small. You might bring up something, they said something that crossed a line, and they'll go, I never said that. You think maybe you misunderstood, maybe you misheard, but it keeps happening. You bring up something they did, and now it's you being paranoid, or that didn't happen like that. Or worse, you're making things up again. At first, it doesn't even feel like abuse. It feels like misalignment, like maybe the two of you just remember things differently. But that's the trick. That's how it sneaks in. Because the goal of a narcissist isn't to control you with force, it's to control you with doubt. Doubt is more dangerous than fear because doubt lives in your head. It echoes, it lingers, it grows. You start wondering, maybe I am overreacting. Maybe it wasn't that serious. Maybe I'm just too sensitive. And just like that, the narcissist gains ground, not because they were right, but because you stop trusting your own perception. That's the thing. Gaslighting doesn't just distort conversations. It distorts you. It disconnects you from your own instincts. You stop speaking up, not because you've forgiven them, but because you're too tired to argue. You start keeping things to yourself, not because it's not worth mentioning, but because you already know how it's going to end with you being the villain in your own story. And here's the kicker. A narcissist will make you believe that your emotional reactions are the real problem. Not what they did, not how they lied, cheated, ignored, or disrespected you. No, you're reacting to it. That's what they focus on. That's what they weaponize. So now the conversation shifts. It's not about the betrayal. It's about your attitude, your tone, your need for drama. They'll spin the story so well that you start managing their emotions instead of your own. This is how they flip the script. You go to them with pain and somehow you're the aggressor. You ask for honesty and suddenly you're being controlling. You express confusion and now you're insecure. They reframe the whole narrative so they're always the calm one, the logical one, the victim. And you're the one who's irrational, unstable, impossible to deal with. That's the mind game. That's the manipulation. And the dangerous part is it works because you love them. Because you want to believe they're not hurting you on purpose. So you stay, you try harder, you get quieter, you internalize everything. You stop trusting your own memory, your own eyes, your own gut. That's what they want. A narcissist wants you to live in a reality that they control. They want to be the filter through which you see yourself. And if they can control the story, they can control you. You'll find yourself apologizing just to keep the peace. You'll find yourself avoiding topics, tiptoeing around truth, dimming your light to keep from triggering another misunderstanding. But that's not peace. That's psychological submission. That's the result of emotional manipulation so deep. It starts rewriting your sense of self. And don't be fooled, gaslighting isn't always loud. Sometimes it comes with charm, with a smile, with soft words like, baby, you're overthinking again, or I'd never do that to you, I love you. It's the smoothness that makes it so dangerous. It feels comforting even though it's corrosive. It feels like connection, but it's actually erasure. They're not soothing your pain, they're invalidating it and calling it love. You ever sit with someone and explain how something made you feel, and instead of hearing you, they dissect you? They turn it into a debate. They treat your emotions like evidence to be cross-examined. They don't lean in with compassion. They lean back with judgment. And somehow, by the end, you're more confused than when you started. That's not a conversation. That's emotional gaslighting. And over time, the damage adds up. You stop recognizing yourself. You used to be confident, decisive, secure, but now you're hesitant. You doubt every choice. You need validation for every opinion. You seek approval from the same person who's been chipping away at your confidence. That's how deep it cuts. It's not just about arguments. It's about identity. It's about control. Let me tell you something. Your memories are valid. Your feelings are real. Your voice deserves to be heard without being twisted into a lie. You shouldn't need to bring receipts just to prove that something hurt you. You shouldn't have to fight to be believed in your own relationship. That's not love. That's manipulation with a smile on it. A narcissist will never take accountability. They'll rewrite history before they ever admit fault. And if you stay long enough, they'll convince you that you're the one who always needs to fix things, that you're the one who keeps ruining the relationship. But that's the magic trick. They break the glass, hand you the shards, and then get mad when you bleed. And the worst part, they don't just gaslight you about the relationship. They gaslight you about you, your worth, your strength, your intuition. They want to be the only voice you trust. And when that happens, they've got you exactly where they want you, doubting yourself, needing them, and too exhausted to fight. But you are not crazy. You are not unstable. You are not too sensitive. You are reacting to a reality that someone else is trying to convince you isn't real. Because if you saw the truth clearly, if you trusted yourself fully, you'd leave. You'd walk away from their manipulation, their control, their empty apologies and twisted stories. And they know that. That's why they gaslight. It's not because they don't know what they're doing. It's because they do. You ever notice how in the beginning they make you feel like you're the center of their universe? Like every word you say is gold. Every move you make is magic. And somehow, out of all the people in the world, you are the one they've been waiting for. It's intoxicating. The compliments come nonstop. The attention feels like oxygen, and you're just soaking it all in, thinking finally someone sees me. But then it shifts slowly, almost invisibly. That love they flooded you with, it starts to dry up. And not all at once. No, that would be too obvious. No, they pull back in increments. Just enough for you to notice something's off, but not enough to clearly call it out. You start wondering, did I do something wrong? That confusion. That's the hook. Because now you're chasing the high they gave you in the beginning. You're trying to earn back the version of them that never even really existed. That version was a mask. See, a narcissist is a master of the bait and switch. They don't just walk into your life with cruelty. That wouldn't work. They come in with charm, with flattery, with affection that feels overwhelming in the best way. And they hook you with that version of themselves. But that version, that's not who they really are. That's who they pretended to be to get access to you. Once they feel like they've secured your attention, your trust, your heart, they shift. And that shift is subtle but brutal. Suddenly, the things they used to love about you, now they criticize. That energy they used to give you, gone. And when you ask about it, when you question the change, they make you feel like you're the one who's being needy. That's the trap. They want you confused. They want you wondering what you did wrong. Because if you're focused on fixing it, you're not focused on leaving. But let me tell you the truth. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't change. They did, or more accurately, they revealed who they really are. See, the person you fell for that person was a performance. And the moment they felt secure in your investment, they stopped acting. What you're seeing now, that coldness, that inconsistency, that emotional distance, that's not a phase. That's the reality of who you've been dealing with. Now, here's where it gets even more twisted. Once they start withdrawing their affection, they don't just disappear. Oh no, they mix in just enough sweetness to keep you stuck. They'll pull back, then give you a taste of that old version of them. Just a little. Just enough to get your hopes up. They'll text something sweet, show up with a smile, say just the right words to make you think maybe things are going back to normal. And then they pull away again. That's not love. That's emotional manipulation. That's breadcrumbing. They keep you on edge, starving for the affection they once gave so freely. They give you just enough to keep you craving, but never enough to actually satisfy you. It's not a relationship. It's a psychological game. And the longer you stay in it, the more you start to doubt your worth. Because you begin to equate their approval with your value. You begin to think, if I could just be a little more patient, a little emotional, a less emotional, a little more perfect, maybe they'll go back to who they were. But they're not going back because they were never really that person to begin with. That idealized version of them was designed to hook you. And now that you're attached, they don't feel the need to pretend anymore. They see your loyalty, your effort, your willingness to fight for the relationship, and they take advantage of it. They know they can withdraw and you'll stay. They know they can give less and you'll work harder. That's not love. That's exploitation. And here's the dangerous part. You start to normalize it. You start to accept emotional starvation as part of the relationship. You start to celebrate crumbs. One kind word feels like a feast. One good day makes you forget the 6 that felt like hell. That's what they want. They want your standards to drop so low that you accept their bare minimum as something special. And that shift, that's not just unhealthy, it's devastating to your self-worth. Because now you're not in love. You're addicted to the idea of who they were. Addicted to the highs and desperate to avoid the lows. And just like any addiction, it starts controlling your thoughts, your emotions, your entire world. You find yourself walking on eggshells, monitoring every word, every move, trying not to upset them. Because when things are good, even for a moment, it feels like magic again. But deep down, you know it never lasts. You begin to feel alone, even when they're sitting right next to you. You try to reach them emotionally, but it's like screaming into a void. They're present physically, but emotionally they're long gone. And yet you keep reaching, hoping, trying, because the memory of that first version of them still lives in your mind like a ghost. And every once in a while, when they feel like you're slipping away, they resurrect it just long enough to reel you back in. But that cycle, that push and pull, that inconsistency, that is not love. That is control. They're not confused. They're calculated. They know exactly what they're doing, creating chaos so you never find your footing, making you so desperate for their approval that you forget you ever had value before they came along. But you did, and you still do. You just forgot because they trained you to forget. You deserve consistency. You deserve safety. You deserve to wake up in a relationship that doesn't feel like an emotional gamble. You shouldn't be wondering, are they going to be cold today or kind? You shouldn't be hoping for the bare minimum. That's not a relationship. That's survival. So if you're sitting there wondering why you feel so drained, so confused, so desperate to be loved by someone who once gave it so freely, it's because you were never dealing with real love in the first place. You were dealing with manipulation dressed up as affection. You were dealing with a narcissist who played the long game to get what they wanted. And once they had it, they showed you who they really were. And now that you know, don't chase the version of them that never truly existed. Chase healing, chase peace, chase a future where love feels safe and consistent and real. Because once you experience that kind of love, you'll never settle for survival again. You've ever been with someone who always plays the victim no matter what they did, no matter how much they hurt you? It somehow ends with them being the one who's wounded. You could catch them red-handed, with receipts, with proof, with the truth laid out plain, and still, they'll twist it all around until you feel like the one who's done something wrong. That right there, that's classic narcissist behavior. They never take responsibility. Instead, they wear victimhood like a costume because they know exactly how to use it. See, here's what most people don't realize about narcissists. They don't want accountability. They want control. And the easiest way to gain control in a confrontation is to flip the script. So instead of owning up to their behavior, they'll turn it around. Suddenly, it's not about what they did. It's about how your tone was too harsh, or how you should handle it differently, or how you're always bringing up the past. And just like that, the spotlight shifts, not on their betrayal, not on their lies, but on your reaction to it. That's how they escape responsibility. You try to talk about the damage they caused, and they derail the entire conversation with a story about how stressed they've been, or how misunderstood they feel, or how you never see things from their perspective. And before you know it, the whole argument becomes about how they feel attacked. They cry, they sulk, they storm out, and suddenly you're the bad guy for making them feel that way. That emotional flip is calculated, because if they can become the victim, they no longer have to be accountable for what they did. And I know if you've ever been in a situation like that, it's exhausting. It's maddening because you walk into the conversation looking for clarity, for healing, for a chance to express your hurt, and you walk out feeling guilty for even bringing it up. That's what narcissists do. They punish you for holding them accountable, and they do it so well, you start to avoid conflict altogether. Not because the issues are resolved, but because you've learned that every confrontation ends with you feeling worse, not better. They'll weaponize your compassion against you. They'll bring up their past trauma, their childhood, their mental health, anything to make you feel like their behavior isn't their fault. And listen, we can have empathy for someone's pain, absolutely, but empathy doesn't excuse abuse. Understanding where someone came from doesn't mean you excuse where they're trying to take you. And a narcissist will use every ounce of your compassion to keep you trapped in a cycle where they hurt you, play the victim, and you end up apologizing for the whole thing. It's a pattern. They create chaos, then retreat into victimhood. They say cruel things, then blame it on a bad day. They ghost you, then return saying they were just going through something. They cheat, then tell you it was because you weren't showing them enough love. You confront the betrayal, and now you're the one being toxic for not letting things go. You see how twisted that gets? It's not just manipulation, it's emotional inversion. And it'll have you second-guessing everything, your reactions, your expectations, even your sanity. And here's the wild part. They often do this so smoothly, so convincingly that outsiders believe them too. Friends, family, even mutual connections, they might look at you like you're the problem. Because narcissists are master performers. In public, they're charming, generous, the life of the party. But behind closed doors, they're dismissive, cruel, emotionally reckless. And when you finally speak up, people don't believe you because the narcissist already painted themselves as the innocent one. They've been playing the victim long before you've even realized there was a problem. So then you're dealing not just with betrayal, but with isolation. You're sitting in silence with the weight of what you experienced while the person who caused it is out there pretending they've been wrong. That's psychological warfare. That's what it means to be gaslit, then silenced. And the longer you stay in that dynamic, the more you start shrinking yourself just to avoid more damage. But here's what you need to hear. Someone who truly loves you will not manipulate you with guilt. They won't flip the blame every time you try to address something real. They won't make you feel bad for needing communication, honesty, or respect. That's not love. That's control dressed up in self-pity. And if you've been bending over backwards to comfort the person who hurt you, just so they don't spiral or shut down, you're not in a relationship, you're in a hostage situation. Real accountability sounds like this: I hurt you and I hurt you, not I only did that because you made me feel unwanted. It sounds like I take full responsibility, not but what about when you did this? If someone can't own their wrongs without turning it into a guilt trip for you, they're not sorry, they're manipulating you into silence. And I know some of you are listening and thinking, but maybe if I just explain it better, maybe if I approach it differently, maybe if I give them more time. No, you could say it calmly, kindly, even in a whisper, and they'd still find a way to make it about how you said it, not what they did. Because they don't want resolution. They want power. And every time you fall into the trap of coddling their ego after they've caused harm, they win. They learn that hurting you comes with no real consequences, just more attention, more control. So let me say this plain: it is not your job to manage someone else's feelings while they destroy yours. It is not your role to heal a person who refuses to acknowledge the harm they've caused. And if someone keeps playing the victim every time they're held accountable, that's not a lack of understanding, it's a lack of character. You deserve to be heard, not guilt-tripped. You deserve resolution, not reversal. And you deserve love that takes responsibility, not one that weaponizes sympathy. Because once you stop falling for their victim act, once you finally stand firm in your truth without backing down or cleaning up the mess they made, you take your power back. And when you do that, you stop being someone they can manipulate and start becoming someone they can no longer control. Have you ever been in a situation where someone could do the most hurtful thing, betray you, break your heart, cross every line you clearly laid down, and yet somehow they come back like nothing ever happened? Not with an apology, not with accountability, but with this smug little smirk, some charm, and hey, you miss me. Like the wound they left you with is supposed to be a distant memory. That right there is what narcissists do. They disappear when it suits them, and they return when they feel like it was zero regard for the damage they caused in their absence. That's not love. That's entitlement. That's someone who believes they can come and go from your life as if you're a revolving door, always open, always available, no matter what they did the last time they walked out. And here's the most dangerous part. Sometimes you let them, not because you're weak, not because you're naive, but because the human heart holds on to hope. Hope that maybe this time it'll be different. Hope that maybe they've changed. Hope that maybe the version of them you fell for is the one who's come back. But what if I told you they come back not because they love you, not because they've changed, but because they miss having control? What if I told you that their return is not a sign of remorse, but a calculated move to see if they still have access to you? That's how narcissists operate. They test the waters. They throw out a message, a thinking of you text, a late night call, just to see if the door is still cracked open. And if you let them in even a little, they will walk back into your life with the same destructive patterns, wearing a different mask. They don't come back with clarity. They don't come back to fix things. They come back to resume the cycle. And the moment they feel like they've reestablished control, like they've got you back under their thumb, that same coldness returns. The love bombing stops. The inconsistency kicks in. The gaslighting resumes, because it was never about building with you. It was always about keeping you as an option. They want to make sure you're still there when their ego needs feeding. They want to know they can still get a reaction from you, still occupy space in your mind, still pull on your emotions like strings on a puppet. That's why they don't care if they hurt you. They care if they still matter to you. And every time you respond, every time you forgive them without accountability, every time you entertain, and maybe this time fantasy, you give them the very power they feed on. Let me make something clear. Someone who truly values you will not vanish when things get inconvenient. They will not betray you, then return acting like you owe them another chance. They will not dismiss your boundaries, your pain, or your healing journey just because they've decided it's a good time for them to come back. That's not reconciliation. That's manipulation. A narcissist doesn't return to repair. They return to reset the game, to see if they can still manipulate the scoreboard. They may come back acting humble, playing the changed person, saying all the right things, but if you look closely, you'll see there's no real action behind the words. No consistency, no effort to rebuild trust, just charm, distraction, and empty promises. That's their move. They're not changed, they're just adapting their tactics. And here's what makes it even more twisted. They count on the time that's passed to have softened your memory. They count on your loneliness, your nostalgia. They count on the fact that healing from the last round of their abuse has made you crave resolution, and they come back pretending to be the closure you've been needing. But they're not the closure. They're the open wound dressed like healing. And if you let them back in, they will tear open everything you worked so hard to mend. You've got to understand, when someone disappears without explanation, when they hurt you and walk away, when they vanish in the moment you needed them, most that tells you everything you need to know about their respect for your heart. If they ghosted you, blocked you, cheated, discarded you like you didn't matter, and then come back with no accountability, just vibes and nostalgia, you owe it to yourself to remember how you felt when they were gone. You owe it to your future self to protect your peace, even if your heart is still tender. Because here's the truth. A narcissist will come back just to prove they still can. And not because they miss you, but because they miss what you gave them: attention, energy, validation. You are a source of supply, And when they run out elsewhere, they come back to the well they left dry. That's not romance, that's recycling. And I get it, it's hard, especially when the person returning knows your soft spots. When they say the exact things you've always wanted to hear. When they bring back the butterflies and moments that remind you of who they used to pretend to be. But you've got to separate who they showed you they are from who they told you they could be. Because words mean nothing without change behavior. Apologies mean nothing without accountability. And feelings mean nothing when they're used as a weapon to keep you stuck. You don't owe anyone another chance just because they suddenly realize what they lost, especially when they only realized it after losing control. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to get revenge, but you do have to remember your worth. You do have to recognize patterns. You do have to protect the healed version of you from the person who broke you in the first place. If someone walks out of your life without respect, don't open the door just because they knock again with charm. Let them stand outside and deal with the consequences of their own choices. Because love, real love, doesn't disappear when it's inconvenient. It doesn't return just to reopen wounds. It stays, shows up, it repairs, it grows. And anything less than that is not worth letting back in.